Hi everyone, thanks for joining us for a new interview. Today we have the pleasure to have the guest Chuck Mindenhall, who is a senior writer at MMAfighting.com. Hi Chuck.
How you doing, guys?
Hi.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for being here. So you are currently on the MMA Beat podcast, and yesterday it was the 100 show, so congrats for that.
Awesome, thanks guys. I can't believe it's already been 100, but then again, you think when we started, I think it was like 2012, and it seems like we should have hit that plateau sooner.
Yeah, congrats. So we're gonna do an interview in 3 parts. I'm gonna start with the first one. 2015 was the year, I want to say, of fallen champs, and it seems that it is continuing. And you spoke a bit about it yesterday, but the angle about the question is this one. Ronda lost her title. Now Holm lost her title. TJ Dillashaw, Cain Velasquez, Aldo, Anthony Pettis. Jon Jones was striped, but we'll talk about him later. And Weidman lost also. Everyone said Conor lost against Nate was a big problem, but everyone agrees that it is not a problem for the UFC because it's still happening. But for the champs, what do you think would be the better way to help them be back for the fallen ones at their top? Would be an instant rematch like a Weidman or Aldo, or do you think that they need to build again themselves?
Are you talking about just champions in general? Just in general, or are you talking about somebody specific?
If you want to go case by case, so you can, or if you want, if you have a general idea, you can develop it also.
It's an interesting question because we have seen a lot of the champions sort of falling over the last year or two. It seems like you're right. With 2015, a lot of the people that we sort of held up to the highest of highs and thought were pretty invincible sort of fell, and that's kind of a crazy thing because somebody had posted a picture not long ago of one of the media things when they brought all the champions together a couple of years ago, and they put them all on the same dais, and they kind of had their belts and everything. I think at some point none of those people had their belts anymore because of Jon Jones' suspension. Dominic Cruz at the time was gone.
Just
and
everybody else,
I
think.
I think Jose Aldo just fallen now. Like they kind of pointed it out after that fact, but it certainly is a game of tearing down the top icons. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's one thing that people sort of have to understand about the sport is that you're not going to see people having 16 fight unbeaten streaks anymore. I think it's just going to be one of those things. There's going to be too much parity in this game, especially within the UFC. People coming up, learning the whole of martial arts. Learning all martial arts as they get in the first time. They're not just like single track mind when they get in there. They have the full game, and I think you're just going to see when whoever wears that bullseye at the top with that belt. They're going to be a real target, and I think we're going to see belts changing hands a lot faster than we normally would. That's just my prediction because you can just see it even in somebody like Ronda Rousey, who was so far out in front of the field. We thought that she was basically going to defeat everybody that was put in front of her for the next couple years, and then right away in the sunset into Hollywood, and kind of that was going to be all we heard from Ronda Rousey, and then Holly Holm comes around, defeats her, and now we're not even sure where Ronda Rousey's mind is in this whole thing. She could be a broken fighter at this point. That's what's part of the intrigue when she comes back. So individually, it's funny, man. We've been talking. You're talking about mentioning Luke Thomas. I know he's been talking about sort of rematch, exhaustion, too many rematches. That's a true thing. I feel like if it's a 13-second knockout like what happened with Aldo, I'm not that inclined to see that rematch right away. I know that some people are like, well, it was never a fight. You never got a chance to see what was going to happen if there was a back and forth. But in my mind, they did get in there and they did it, and he went out in 13 seconds. So that could wait. I'd rather something like that wait. Something like Holly Holm and Ronda Rousey, I know it's a big money fight for the company, but my question is, do you really want to make Ronda Rousey vulnerable? Before this whole Tate thing happened, but do you really want to make her that vulnerable psychologically and everything else that goes into that fight? because you could ruin her for good if you put her in there and she loses again, especially if she lost exactly the same way, where she just had no answers for Holly Holm. So each case is sort of you have an individual, so you have to sort of look at the exact scenario and say, like, does it warrant a rematch or doesn't it? I would say it's 50-50. There's some fights, Robbie Lawler against Rory McDonald, you see a fight like that, I would watch that fight 5 times a year, you know what I mean? Because that's a crazy fight, although that would be a little sadistic, because the way they beat each other. But that's a great fight. I mean, some fights like that I'm cool with, but there's other ones you just have to sort of say, like, well, let's let something else happen first and then reshape that division.
Yeah, but I have a question. What do you attribute it to, the fact that champions lose more nowadays? Is it because the old champions were so great that they were dominating everybody else and they were at the top of the game for 10 years, like GSP or Anderson Silva or anybody? Or is it because now the divisions are stronger, the small fighters are better, and everybody is just upping his game, and what is it between the two?
Kind of all the above. I mean, truthfully, I think people are better. Generally speaking, the people who come up and challenge are better. There's a lot more money attached now to having that belt. So there's a lot more incentive for people to get as good as they can and to be in the best condition they can to take that belt away. So you're seeing that a lot. You're seeing the hungrier challengers kind of coming up. There's also, like I said earlier, there's parity. There's an equal playing field that comes with like the testing with USADA. That comes with just people coming up and learning all the aspects of the game coming in. A lot of these young people and some of the old guard who were able to get by on maybe their jiu-jitsu alone or their ability to box or whatever, a couple of those combinations, they're sort of the old guard now. They're being pushed out. They can't really compete. You see a lot of the fallen icons, the guys who are at the top for a long time, who aren't really competing as well because of age, and also because guys like BJ Penn weren't even that old. It's just that the game has sort of caught up to him, I think, a little bit and surpassed him. So there's a lot of factors kind of going into that, but I think that there's just incentive to sort of be ready and to win that belt, and then the parity and all those things kind of coming in. But I honestly think that somebody like Jon Jones, this is a big intrigue coming up for a guy like him, because he was the guy we're sort of talking about. Here's one guy who's been dominating, and when we had Holly Holm, we had Conor McGregor, we've had a couple of other examples, but nobody's done what Jon Jones is doing. Now he's coming back and facing his arch nemesis, and Daniel Cormier, and you wonder, like, how will he look? This new sober Jon Jones or whatever he's got going on. This guy, is he going to look as dominant as he has, or is he going to join that crop? I feel like he's sort of the last guy of that bastion of like really top notch guys who didn't lose. We didn't see him lose for years, and it'll be, to me, that's the intrigue with that. But if he falls, I feel like at that point it would be like the whole UFC. You got to understand some guys are going to lose on any given night. I think that's going to be the new norm. Nothing's going to be ruined. It's just going to have to be a new psychological approach to watching the sport. Like, you're not going to see guys on these decade-long win streaks coming up. One other thing on that, I feel like the UFC has really been trying to make these big pairings these days. I mean, they're looking at, back in the day, it's like, I don't want to say that Anderson Silva was picking his opposition, but he was certainly influencing the guys he was going to face. He fought a lot of guys he should beat, and that's one of those things that you see happening less and less. You don't see guys able to sort of pick with the rankings and stuff that they've got kind of going on. You're not able to sort of pick, I want to face that guy, or I want to, we think we should be facing him. It really comes down to who merits it, or who's the biggest fight. So a lot of times you're made vulnerable as a champion, more vulnerable these days, and we've been seeing it a lot. Chris Weidman going in there against Anderson Silva, who he didn't want to face at the time, and then you see what happens. And I feel like if they think the champion can be beat by somebody, if he has a vulnerability, I feel like the UFC is not shying away from making that fight these days.
And just to go back a little bit, because I think that you made the great point with Ronda Rousey, saying that she might become vulnerable with a loss to Holly Holm. I think that it is even more true with 2 cases. Chris Weidman, if he lost to Luke Rockhold, as Luke said it in the Unstoppable press conference, is going to become his Anderson Silva. And what to do of this great champ who in 2 row had 2 losses against Chris Weidman. And then just another question. It's a bit different, but Conor McGregor is great to sell himself. We've seen him handling the loss like a great champ. Okay, he's still the champ now, but everyone saying maybe Frankie Edgar or maybe Aldo. If he loses again, is there a risk for the UFC to lose another big name, or another one will now appear and?
It's complicated because if you listen to Dana White, he always says that they've always got guys coming up behind their stars, but there's not been a pair of stars that have come along and really rescued the sport the way that Conor McGregor has and Ronda Rousey. I don't know about rescue, but they certainly brought it to a whole another level by coming in when they did, because 2012, 2013, we were starting to hit a little bit of a plateau. Like I didn't feel like things were moving along. Not much mainstream attention, even though they had the Fox deal sort of rolling. I didn't feel like you were getting, there certainly weren't going to be any Sports Illustrated covers, things like this. And these people have sort of put them on the map. So I do think that those two particularly, because they're sort of transcendent of, the culture, they're transcendent of the fight game, they become something else. It's a little different for those guys, because if McGregor loses, if he goes back down to 145 and loses his belt, that's a huge blow. I feel like right now the great thing about him is you can put an asterisk on this fight. He was going up 2 weight classes, taking on a guy on 11 days notice, essentially, like he had a change of opponent. And it was just basically like, yeah, why not? Let's do it. And so you can sort of say like, well, if he goes back down to 145 and defends against maybe Frankie Edgar or Jose Aldo, you think like, well, that was just a weird thing that happened. And you're right back into his wheelhouse of being, a big star. And I think that's going to continue for him as long as he's winning. But you're right. I think if he goes down there and loses, or I wonder sometimes if that's why they're hesitant to put him against a guy like Frankie Edgar right away, because there's a little bit of there's a scary note there that Conor McGregor suddenly riding 2 losses in a row and he lost his belt. So that's going to be a little bit of a risk factor. But I genuinely believe Conor will fight whoever they put in front of him. So it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. As for Chris Weidman, you mentioned Chris Weidman and Rockhold. That's a really unique situation. I didn't think they should do that rematch right away. There was a couple of guys, even though it was sort of hazy, there was a couple of guys they could have plugged into that situation to fight Rockhold right away. And I fear that, with Rich Franklin, when he lost, Danielson Silva a couple times, you just sort of, what happens to Chris Weidman? He sort of goes into that space. Suddenly he becomes a guy who is in limbo and either has to go up to 205 pounds just to get back into contention, or he has to hope that Luke Rockhold loses. And I never like that scenario, but I think that's a real risk that's kind of going on with that fight coming up.
Yeah, and what about Conor? Do you feel the UFC is going to put him against Aldo or against Frankie Edgar? Do you have any input, any news?
Well, I say that all the time. Like it's sort of like it's almost like it's up to Conor. I almost believe like whoever he sort of wants to fight is who they might go with. But I think that they would go with Frankie Edgar. Only because, you guys remember in December when he knocked out Chad Mendes, it was like, you're next, and then everything changes 24 hours later. I just feel like you sort of, now that it goes back into that original scenario, he has to go back down to 145. At least that's the thinking, is that he'll have to go down to 145. I don't think he's going to get a shot at RDA's belt coming off a loss. So I think Frankie Edgar would make the most sense. I think that's the bigger fight, too. Like, I know that Brazil is really behind Jose Aldo. I know that a lot of people would like to see that rematch, but to me, they could hold off on that and still have a big fight when he fights next, if he continues to fight at 145, or maybe they meet at 155 down the line. But that fight can sit on the horizon for a little bit, and I think the most important one, or the one that makes the most sense right this moment, is Frankie Edgar.
But like you said, it makes the most sense to give Frankie Edgar a shot, but it's the more risky one, I feel, 100%. For Conor McGregor in the case of a loss. And the second part is that Aldo, who is quiet all the time, is now in a campaign of injuring Conor McGregor, like if he wanted to poke him, to say, okay, I want you as a fighter. Don't you think that not only it might be harder to sell Aldo rematch, but not saying that Aldo has no chance to win, but it might be a little bit safer than putting Frankie Edgar in front of Conor?
Yeah, probably. I mean, if the first fight told us anything, is that Conor can stand with him and trade with him. I mean, he knocked him out in 13 seconds. So I feel like there's a little bit of fatigue, because remember, those two were supposed to fight already, and then Mendes had to step in and fight when Aldo went down. So that fight's been sort of brewing and brewing and brewing. I feel like at some point you just feel a little bit like, let's see what else there is, just because that fight's been out there for so long. Having said that, I mean, I know that Brazil likes Jose Aldo, and I know that there are plenty of Americans and plenty across the globe, basically, who would like to see that rematch. Just knowing that Jose Aldo was as on top of the game as he was for as long as he was, that he deserves that rematch. And if let's put it this way, if Conor makes a case and says, I think we should give it to Jose Aldo, I think it'll be Jose Aldo, because I still think Conor McGregor's the guy who sells the fight regardless. But I think Frankie Edgar would absolutely, he's in a new state of mind. I feel like Frankie Edgar would contribute to that build-up 100%. And I think that there'd be big intrigue as to what happens when, he's a bit more of a grappler. I think he'd try to get it to the mat. What happens when that goes on with Conor? There's some question marks there again. So in my mind, yes, more dangerous, I think, just from what we perceive off that first Aldo fight. But also just, I think, bigger business. But I could be wrong about that. I mean,
but as fans, we are fans too, and we'd like to see the Frankie Edgar fight a little bit more, I think.
But I wouldn't mind
we wouldn't mind Aldo,
but I wouldn't mind as John Kavanagh said on the MMA Hour just after you spoke on Monday. He said that he felt that he didn't see everything because it was only 30 seconds, and I felt kind of okay with him because during that fight I'm a Conor McGregor fan, so I was really happy that it ended quickly. But at the same time, there's a part of me saying, okay, people are going to think it was luck, because it was one shot and one clear shot, but just luck over 30 seconds.
Right. Yeah. John Kavanagh too. He's great, by the way. That interview was like one of the better ones I've heard in a while. But I can appreciate that they're saying that. You're not sure if they're lobbying. You're not sure if that's what they want to happen. But I can appreciate that they said, that wasn't really a fight. Even from their perspective, they're saying like, let's give him another chance to show that he's got more than that. Because I mean, ultimately, you can't go wrong. I think whoever you plug Conor, even if he fights at 155 next, which I don't really foresee, which could happen though. I mean, maybe they do. There's some rumblings that, maybe he fights a guy like Nate Diaz again. Maybe they do that rematch. I mean, whatever they do, it's just going to be a big fight. So at this point, it's just you got to kind of enjoy
UFC
the
200 will be big, and Conor's name will draw everybody, so no problem.
Yeah. But a lot of times we hear you on your podcast, Luke Thomas, Ariel Elwani, and you and Jeff Wagenheim saying that there is no wrong answer, and that's for real. There is literally no wrong answer. If it is Aldo, it is okay, it is great. It is Frankie Edgar, it is great for the pay-per-view, and also a rematch with Nate. Why not? We will watch it.
Everybody will watch it. So
they're saying now that this UFC 196 may have broken the pay-per-view record, which is really crazy, because the UFC 100 being where it was and how much hype it had behind it, and being like that milestone event, Brock Lesnar and all this, if it really passed it, I mean, this was a makeshift lineup. I mean, you had Diaz come in sort of, with 11 days. I mean, it just shows you the power of Conor McGregor, really, but matching him against people that are really intrigued by the fight. So I feel like you're right. There's really no. I mean, they could put him against a no-name, and I feel like people would really. They're still going to do 500,000 pay-per-view buys. Putting them against me or you guys. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so we wanted to talk about something else, the press conference. Sorry, Unstoppable. So It was during this crazy week last week, and we saw a lot of interesting things. We don't want to talk yet about Jon Jones and DC. We'll talk about it later. But personally, the thing I noticed the most, and the most interesting thing to me, was Chris Weidman's aggression and behavior and demeanor towards Luke Rockhold and towards the whole situation. He didn't look defeated at all. He didn't look. He looked. I don't know. I felt like he had a shot after the fight. I thought if they had a rematch one day, he would be destroyed again. But I saw him with that rage, with that intensity, and I felt like he might have a shot, actually. What do you think about Weidman and the whole press conference in general?
he's a big time competitor. And remember too, he's a psychological major from Hofstra. Like, you know, he was a psych major in college, and I think he really knows sort of the, you know, how to get into people's heads a little bit. He certainly did it with Anderson Silva. I think he did it with Vitor Belfort. And I think he's playing that game. You know, he's trying to get under Luke Rockhold's skin. And I got to admit, Luke Rockhold does let people get under his skin a little bit. I remember the Michael Bisping lead up in that fight, and there's been a couple times he really gets intense, and he uses it to his advantage. But it'll be interesting to see in the lead up to this fight if there's a psychological factor, if you notice anything that maybe Weidman is getting the better of him in those exchanges, and how that will translate come fight night. But I will say that you know, Weidman is not one. He's not one to really make excuses. He did kind of disclose that he had some problems in his camp. It seems like he's had to overcome a lot of adversity through his through his time so far. You know, from like the sort of the hurricane that went through there to various injuries to having to cut. I think it was like 35 pounds in a couple of days to fight Damian Maia at that time. He's always kind of come. He's a very strong-minded guy. So I feel like you're going to see the best Weidman that there is, the best one available, and I think he really is kind of fueling himself. You know, he's fueling himself up for this fight. He's also a very smart fighter, so I think whatever he kind of learned from that first fight will come into play, and I expect this one to be a lot more competitive. And I would be surprised. It would be a big tribute to Luke Rockhold if he's able to, you know, kind of replicate what he did in that first fight.
I have a question because we did analyze on the podcast the press conference Unstoppable, and I said it was like watching a riot in a jail cell, and Dana being a guard. And there was a lot of back and forth between Dominic Cruz and Uriah Faber. Swab said that Tony Ferguson was dressed and looked like the Mexican cartel hand guy. And we were laughing a lot. You as a journalist, do you enjoy those press conferences, or for you it is just some show to sell and to appeal to the public?
They haven't done a ton of these, but I mean, I don't mind them. They're kind of fun because they're a little bit forced. I don't know. When they did the Go Big one and Conor McGregor showed up and he was basically insulting the whole panel of people, which I enjoy that because that's fun. You just see how crazy he can be and how it's always a hype game and it's a psychological game. You can see how much leaps and bounds he is above a lot of these guys. They just can't compete with him on that level. So in those ways, it's kind of fun, but it also, you see the bad blood between a lot of these, and I feel like bad blood really translates well, obviously, when you go into a fight.
Yeah.
Joanna Jędrzejczyk and kind of going, with Claudia, that whole thing got me a little bit more into it. But the big thing for something like that for me is obviously the return of Jon Jones and seeing kind of the reception he was getting from the fans, because I felt like he was suddenly back in the good graces of the fans, whereas when he left off a year ago, or whatever it was, people were booing him, and they didn't really. He was sort of the villain. Yeah. I feel like it's changed a little bit, and sometimes you got to see those guys come together in a circumstance like that to really understand where the pulse is on these types of events. But it certainly, this one played out pretty well because I felt like you saw some of the bad blood between those guys, and it wasn't artificial. A lot of what's going on between the fights that they have booked right now there's some bad blood between them. So it just makes you realize, I guess, from a journalist, like, man, there is a nice slate of fights coming up. There's going to be a lot of good vendettas in play and everything else. So I think they're fun. Right now, they haven't overdone that sort of thing. So I'm all for it as long as they want to do them.
Yeah, it was great. We enjoyed it, like you said. But my question is, we saw a lot of great fight coming until UFC 200. But what do we have left for UFC 200? That's my question, because everybody's fighting. That's great fight, title fights. What do we have? Who can we put on that card? Do they have like a secret weapon or something like a GSP maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, that's the one question, right? GSP is going to. I saw that he's going to be at this Philadelphia Comic-Con in June. That made me wonder. I was like, because that's only like a month out, or less than a month out from when UFC 200 is coming. That makes me think he's not doing it. I thought for a while there, I was like, that might be the prime opportunity for him to step back in there and do it. But honestly, I don't know. I feel like you're going to see, if Ronda Rousey is available, I don't know if it's even possible. But if she's available, I feel like you'll see her. If she can against Miesha Tate, I feel like that would happen. I feel like you see Conor McGregor against whichever, whoever they can put him against, whether that's Aldo or Edgar or Diaz again or something. They could put a guy like Nick Diaz against Michael Bisping, and I'm not sure. I think they said that Diaz can't come back yet, so that's why they can't do that one.
He can't come back yet.
No? He's just off. He's just off. Like, he can do UFC 201, but I don't know. I mean, you figure because it is 200, you're going to see McGregor on that show for sure. I would guess that they're going to talk to Ronda Rousey about trying to get that, because obviously if you get those two together, it's already
it's a done deal.
And then you could just have some other fights. But honestly,
Robbie Lawler, maybe the welterweight title. Robbie Lawler.
Yeah, and then you got guys like Robbie Lawler, I think they were trying to put McGregor against Lawler had he won, and now you're back into what do you do with him? So that's an interesting thing. I mean, maybe people have been talking about Nate Diaz kind of capitalizing on his star going against him. Who knows? But I mean, any of these would be fine scenarios stacked together if they were able to kind of put those fights all together.
Yeah. And just a question, because we started the year with maybe the fight of the year between Lawler and Condit, and there has been the fight between Nate and Conor. Everyone saying that Tyron Woodley might had a shot against Lawler, that Conor would have won if he won against Nate. Now this is Nate maybe having a shot against Lawler. Do you think that people have forgotten about Carlos Condit, and this to me was a legitimate rematch because of the scoring, maybe?
Yeah. The big problem with Carlos Condit is he started flirting with, retiring, and I think that threw a monkey wrench into it. Just given that there were other contenders waiting, and let's face it, there were guys who were probably ahead of him even when he got his title shot. So it's a little bit of a strange condition with him and circumstance. But I think that, I would love to see that fight again. It's almost like Robbie Lawler, any fight he's been in the last couple of years, you don't mind seeing that fight played out again. He's just that kind of guy. So he's not, but it's kind of crazy too. At the same time, he's not, because he's so soft-spoken, he's just a fighter. He goes in there and he does it all in the cage. I don't feel like he sells the fights like some of the other guys do. So and neither does Carlos Condit. I think if they go with a guy like Lawler, they may want to get somebody. Obviously, if they got GSP, that's a huge thing, and maybe that's still what they have up their sleeve. I don't know, but I think they have to have somebody who's going to help sell that fight. Even though he's done nothing but he's had the fight of the year the last couple of years, and so there's no question he's going to put on a good fight. But it's just finding the right guy, and I don't know Carlos Condit at this moment in time. Even though he did that great fight. We talked about that rematch sort of fatigue earlier. I feel like that would be one of those scenarios where you're like, there's just too many other guys you could plug into that situation right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we are going to talk a bit about Jon Jones against Cormier 2. I have a question, because we've seen the press conference Unstoppable. Earlier in the year, Ariel was the first one to interview Jon for a long period of time, 1 hour, I think, or maybe more. Yeah. It seems like Jon finally, as a character and as a fighter, didn't change. He's as cool when he's with Ariel, and as angry when he's with DC. They just can't see each other. So what do you make of the press conference Unstoppable and the psychological factor? Because it seems like DC, even though he's now the champ, he's not more confident, and he's just like a little boy when he sees a bully and wants to fight with him.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. I mean, from Jon Jones' perspective, he never gave up that belt.
Which he didn't.
And it's clear to him. Yeah, he didn't. He never did. And it's clear if you're watching him how much or if you paid attention to it, it's just how much it bugs him that there's Daniel Cormier parading himself on UFC Tonight or whatever platform it is as the champion. And every promo that they see him in, he's the champion. And it's a guy that they don't like each other. This has been established going back to when they first came together in that brawl and everything else. It's just, I think it's psychologically it's a huge thing. I know that Daniel Cormier is very smart, and he knows sort of how to get under Jon Jones' skin just right. And Jon Jones is to the point where I know he didn't want to really grant Cormier another shot originally, but now he has to come at it from the other angle. And it's a really interesting thing. I don't really like the hyperbole of comparing Muhammad Ali and things like that, to these guys, because it's a completely different time, and none of these guys are out there changing culture. The closest we have is Ronda Rousey to sort of, changing the culture around her in pop society and all that. But you think back to Ali in this first fight with Joe Frazier, because Joe Frazier, while Ali was suspended and never gave the belt, had it stripped, 3.5 years later, he comes against a guy who was holding the belt, and Joe Frazier, and they put on that great fight. I sort of have that feeling, you know what I mean? Like, where you're like, this is one of those crazy situations where a guy just feels an injustice has lived for a full year while he's been, cleaning his act up, hopefully, or whatever he's been doing, all, kind of getting his life back together. But for that whole year, the thing that was his identity in the public has been stripped from him, and I feel like that's going to translate in the build-up in this next couple of weeks. And who knows? But I feel like Jon Jones, we're going to learn a lot about Jon Jones in a hurry coming into that April fight. And I have to, watching that press conference, it kind of got me excited about it. Because I think we were so into Conor and everything else, you forget, that this guy's coming back. And perfect timing for him to kind of re-enter into that space.
Absolutely, yeah. Chuck, I kind of disagree when you say that Daniel is getting under Jon's skin. I feel quite the opposite. I don't know, Daniel Cormier seems so intelligent, so soft-spoken, like you said, so calm. But when he's around Jon Jones, he lets all his emotions pour out of him. And I feel like just like noticing the fans booing him and giving attention to the fans that were booing him, that was his first mistake. And then every time he said to Jon, "You called me what in backstage? A pussy?" And he repeated the words. I think that was a sign of weakness, and from someone so intelligent, so brave.
Yeah, 100%. It goes that way too. 100%. I feel like they both get under each other's skin. I was mainly talking from Jon Jones' perspective, but from the other way, 100%. You're absolutely right. I feel like nobody's going to ruffle the feathers of Daniel Cormier quite like Jones, and nobody's going to go the other way. I feel like it's that personal, and that's what makes it. It goes just beyond, it's so personal. It goes just beyond your typical fight, because generally speaking, there's some bad blood. There's things like that kind of go in it. But this is personal. These guys, you just get the feeling they hate each other, and I felt how that's going to emotionally play out. I mean, it's going to be fun it's always fun to watch it, because your rooting interest changes as each exchange kind of goes by.
Absolutely.
So it'll be real fun to watch how these guys handle it.
And just a last question about DC, because I think that sometimes MMA is like chess and poker. You like Swab said, in order to win and win the mental warfare, you need to show your opponent that you are that not only you have no weaknesses, but that he can hurt you with his words. And it felt every time I see DC talking in the press, I see some guy who is bright, who is funny, but as soon as he's facing Jon, he seems like a child who is badly enduring, how to say it, injustice. Or
he can handle the fact that people like Jon,
and because he did mistake and they love the redemption part, and he doesn't get to do the redemption part, and it seems that he's gonna do exactly the same mistake in the octagon when they'll fight again. Don't you feel a bit like that, or
how would it translate in the octagon?
It could be. It has sat with Daniel Cormier a long time too. Let's not forget that he hadn't lost. This was his one loss, so I feel like this will also be very intriguing, because this is something after he defended against after he beat Anthony Johnson, his first thing out of his mouth was, "Jon Jones, clean up. Let's do this thing again." I feel like he's been sitting on a lot of his own competitive, how he's going to handle it himself. Like, how's he going to change? How's he going, he's been talking it. He's been talking the big game about he's not going to, some of the mistakes he made in that first fight he will not see again. I don't know. I mean, this is why it's so interesting to watch. I mean, that first fight, I remember sitting there cage side, and I was a little dumbstruck that Jones was able to dump Cormier and take him down the way he did. And some of those types of things, I'm like, when he starts doing that, that's a psychological thing too. Just knowing that, who else has done this to Daniel Cormier? Nobody's really taken him down and, jumping him to the canvas. Some of these types of things, he's going to have to relive basically going into this match, and I don't know. But that's what makes it so fun. I feel like you just don't know the psychology, and then the gamesmanship, and then the competitive side of it. How do they make these adjustments and everything else? I will say that Jon Jones, I feel like, he's with Winklejohn and Jackson. I just know those guys always, after they've seen something once, I feel like they really can hone in and say, hey, we're going to attack this even better, or we're going to do this more efficiently. It'll be interesting to see what they found out as well, and who makes the other guy dance to their tune, because Jon Jones, we just don't know. He's been out a little bit. I have this feeling he's going to look every bit as good as he ever did, but you just really don't know. And
yeah. That's so exciting.
What great stakes, man. What great stakes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have, not really a question, but I have something to say about Jon. Don't you feel like, from a marketing perspective, he should have, maybe now it's too late, he should have embraced the villain role. I think for him, for his legacy, for his business, and for the UFC, if Jon, from the beginning, even though he's not a bad guy, I do believe in heart of hearts, he's a good guy.
Yeah.
I don't know him personally, but I do think he's a good guy. But publicly, he seems like the villain role suits him perfectly. Don't you think that he should have embraced it and been the bad guy and talk trash to the fans and to everybody and and diss the UFC and everybody else? What do you think about that?
I think you're right. I mean, if you remember the way he started out when he was beating guys like Stefan Bonner and stuff, he was this pastor's kid who, was very soft-spoken and everything, and was very against drinking and all this stuff. I mean, I remember him being very adamant that he was going to be like that. And so as soon as this started to turn, I think the big thing that happened to him was that Rashad Evans fight, because I felt like he was exposed generally as a guy who wasn't genuine, as a guy who could never be sincere, as a guy who was fraudulent, and how he presented himself, a guy who was two-faced. Well, a lot of that stuff was really true. But what should have happened at that point, I think, was that as soon as he started, giving into that side of him that wanted to rub it in people's faces and stuff, he should have stuck to that, because it only perpetuated. It only became more awkward through his time, because I feel like most people just kind of viewed him as a guy who didn't have a true identity, who wanted to present one way but was something else, secretly partying and all this stuff. So I feel like at some point, he should have switched, and I think that would have been a more genuine approach. Honestly, it wouldn't have been like a heel move in terms of a manufactured one or something that was calculated. I think that just would have been more of a natural expression of himself to be like, you know what, guys, if you don't like me, I don't like you, and we can play this game all day. But I think a big part of him wants to be loved, and that's the first big problem with him. It's not lovable when you go back and forth. It's not, when you can't put a peg on a person and they're in that position, and 1 minute they're one thing, 1 minute they're something else. So
it seems fake.
I feel like he got a little mixed up in that whole thing. But he should. I agree with you 100%. We've talked about this before on the MMA Beat. He should have went heel, and he should have just gave into that, and any of his good side would have just stood out that much more, given that you felt like he was being natural at that point.
Absolutely, yeah. I do agree.
So now we're gonna do a quick Q&A with you, some light questions, and Sue is gonna start.
Okay, so tough question. What's your favorite combat movie?
Ooh, probably man. I love all the Bruce Lee movies, but I'll still say, because it's the one sticks. I'll say Karate Kid, the original.
Jimmy Rivera said exactly the same thing.
What's that?
Jimmy Rivera, the bantamweight, the fighter, said that it was his favorite movie, combat movie too.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it. You see it at an impressionable time. But I also like the Rocky movies. There's so many good ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
If you were in the place of Sean Shelby, the matchmaker, what fight would you like to organize?
For Sean Shelby, so for the lower weight, well, I would. Man, that's a toughie. I guess right now it'd be McGregor. It'd be McGregor, and I want to see McGregor fight Frankie Edgar. I mean, to me, that's the fight to make. So, I mean, he's in a position to make it, but that's the fight I think I would go with right this second.
And the upper weight classes?
In the upper weight classes, man, it was so much easier when you had these super fight scenarios, because this guy and this guy. But let me think. I'd still love to see it would be a lot of fun to see. I still would like to see Cain Velasquez at his best against a guy like Jon Jones.
Yeah.
Or you'd like to see somebody like Chris Weidman fight Jon Jones. You know, those fights, those types of fights really cross up really nicely. It sucks because now some of these guys have losses and there's been some shake-up, but to me those are still very fun fights to contemplate.
Yeah, absolutely. Jon Jones at heavyweight too. And if you were a fighter in the UFC, what would be your entrance song?
Oh, man. I used to do a chat and people would ask me this all the time. There's a song called Dot Gain by Deer Hunter. It's a I don't know how big they are like globally, but they're sort of a indie darling out here. But it's a perfect sort of lead up song. The other one was Rory I've said this for years. Tool, it's Tool's 40 and 2, or I think it's 46 and 2 or 40 and 2, whatever it's called. But Rory McDonald actually walked out to it in his last fight, and look how he transformed. I mean, it's just his entrance music. No, but that's a great one too. It would be one of those two songs.
Okay. So now let's imagine that you are a fighter. What would be your dream matchup or the worst matchup ever? Maybe you had if you had to compete in the UFC.
If I had to fight,
yeah.
I want to fight the sloppiest guy there is. I don't know, man.
Give us a name.
That's a toughie. I really don't know. I don't even know how to answer that. If it's, I guess it'd be fun to if I'm as good as I'm imagining myself to be, and not as good as I realistically am.
Have the real you,
somebody like Nick Diaz, because I feel like this the way he fights. If I'm able to sort of go in there, because I like the fact that at some point it turns into something visceral with that guy. It becomes like this, taunting and throwing and just it's entertainment with like a very raw edge. That would be my kind of fight.
Great choice. Who's the GOAT? Who's the greatest of all time?
I'm going to stick with Jon Jones for the time being. So far, he hasn't done anything to prove otherwise, and he has been through a lot of guys, and the way he's finished them, I think we'll know a lot more about him come April when he gets in there with Cormier, and then he kind of makes his way into heavyweights and kind of when he gets into that range. But right now, I think that's the guy, only because of who he's fought and for as long as he's done it. My second would probably, and it would be a close second, it would probably be Georges St. Pierre, only because I feel like he too had to face kind of the guys, a long time who were the best in the welterweight division. Anderson Silva would be up there too, but I feel like some of those guys were really tailor-made for him to cut down. So I would put it probably in that order.
Absolutely.
Okay, so a few days ago, Jon Anik got tattooed the 209 of Nate Diaz on his arm.
Yeah.
If and only if there was a fight leading to UFC 200 and you were saying, okay, I'm ready to lose my hat over this fight, which one would it be?
So in the same situation as Jon Anik, you're saying
who do you feel is for you who has to win and you don't see losing leading to 200?
Well, if it's Ronda Rousey, that would be the one. I mean, she can't afford to lose, right? Like that would be and so much of it goes into that because our industry is as strong as it is because of Ronda Rousey and Conor McGregor. I don't know where we'd be right now if it weren't for those two guys sort of busting down that into the mainstream or whatever and kind of getting so much attention. But I guess I'd say Ronda Rousey. She has to come through if she's fighting on it. I'm just saying I'm taking a big stab in the dark that she is, but if she's fighting on it.
And just a question, something else about Ronda Rousey. Is she Misha's kryptonite?
Yeah, I mean, she has been. One of these things. It's interesting because we don't know in what form she returns. How much is she damaged? That's really the question. And then you also have Miesha Tate, who's completely hungry, has had 2.5 years to reflect on that last fight, which she looked a lot better, the second time through than the first. So yeah, but I'm still going to say that Ronda Rousey is basically her.
I feel like she
might look great against anybody.
Maybe the new Miesha, the champion. Maybe she can. I don't know.
If
it changes the picture a little bit.
Imagine if Miesha Tate fights Ronda Rousey and beats her. That's really the moment where now things have really truly changed.
Do you watch Looking for a Fight?
I've seen it. I mean, I'm pretty good buddies with Nick the Tooth, so I've watched a couple of them. I haven't seen all of them though. I didn't get to see the one where Mickey Gall. I never did get a chance to actually watch that one, but I've watched a couple of them.
And would you enjoy, you think, to be a part of this band while they are shooting, looking for a fight? Because they seem a bit crazy when they do it.
It looks like a fun project. If I'm them, I would stick to that and maybe the hijinks. They don't really need to go do the food thing. I mean, we see that sort of stuff in other, but they're figuring it out. I mean, you got a nice little balance of guys in that show, and then you got Dana White, who's obviously the head honcho. So I've been enjoying it. It's kind of cool. It's a great marketing tool for them to discover these guys like Mickey Gall and like Sage Northcutt, obviously, and have a backing or it's like a vehicle to market them before they ever step in there. And I feel like that's something that Tough, the Ultimate Fighter, isn't doing necessarily anymore. So it's great that they figured out something else. But yeah, it'd be fun to be a part of that rogue, band of rogues.
Just a last question, because he had a great idea the other day on the show, and I just remembered. Do you think it would be ever possible one day that they do a main card based on fighting teams fighting each other, like ATT fighting AKR or Jackson Wink?
Not like Tough, like the real elite guys of each gym.
Yeah. I mean, those types of things have been discussed, and I wouldn't be surprised at all, especially as some of these rivalries grow. And it really burns some of these gyms when other gyms get notoriety or become up and get famous ahead of them or get more credit. I can guarantee you there's a lot of coaches out there that are seething that guys like Greg Jackson are constantly talked about as the best coach,
Yeah.
And then you see these other, what I mean? So I feel like, yeah, you could put those together, and they've got so many inherent rivalries already between those gyms. They could easily do it. And it would be a fresh way to kind of go about it to have, that just let the bad blood kind of clash all together. To me, that would be a lot more fun.
Yeah,
I mean, they've dabbled with it, but they haven't really done that yet.
Yeah. And last thing, I know you're a Broncos fan.
Yeah.
How big of a deal was it for you personally? Where were you during the Super Bowl? How did you react? And tell us about it.
Well, I was at the UFC. So they were supposed to have that big UFC 196. It became Wonder Boy against Johnny Hendricks. So I was in Las Vegas. I live on the East Coast, and I booked my flight super early so that I could get back in time to see it. So I got back with about half an hour to go. I was drinking on the plane. I was already ready to roll. And so by the time I was home, I have some Broncos stuff. I have a flagpole outside. I put the Broncos flag up, and I just watched it with my family. But man, they've won it in the past, and I'm always a little tearful. I turn into a little boy when they get in the situation and they actually get it done. So it was the highlight of years and years and years of frustration to kind of come through again. It's like
did you ever meet John Elway?
I've shook his hand before, but never really in a situation where you're talking to him for real, but yeah, I've met him before, but it's,
best day of your life.
Yeah.
Right.
So thank you very much, Chuck, for all this. For people, they can follow you on Twitter, Chuck Mindenhall.
Yep.
They can listen to you every Thursday on the MMA Beat and read at MMAfighting.com on the website. And,
that's right.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chuck. It was an honor. Thank you,
guys. Let's hope we get France done soon so that I can come say hi in person.
Absolutely,
we do hope, but we don't think that it's gonna be for very soon. I think you will have New York first, and in a few years, maybe in France.
Well, you guys come to New York, and then we'll go out and do it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure to have you, and thank you again.
Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye. Have a nice day.